Hey athletes, I'm Haley Herdman, former D1 basketball player, mental health therapist, and mental performance coach for athletes.
And I'm Naomi Yim, also former D1 basketball player, athlete mentor, and mental health advocate.
And we are the hosts of Mental Training Room. This is the space where athletes get real about the mental side of sport.
Whether you're on the court, field, or just figuring it all out, we've been there.
And we're bringing you the conversations we wish we had as athletes in hopes to help you become mentally elite.
Let's train the mind like we train the body. Welcome to the Mental Training Room.
Welcome back to the Mental Training Room. Today, I am joined by Dr. Kim Hollingdale. I'm so excited to have her here. So today, we're going to be talking about the mind-body connection in sport, which is one of Dr. Kim's specialties I've come to learn about.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Of course. Can you kind of give us a brief rundown or introduction to what that exactly is?
Sure. So simply put, the mind-body connection, as I see it, is about how everything in our brain influences our physical body, and our physical body and movement can influence what's in our brain. We've all probably had the experience of doing a little exercise, doing a little movement, and noticing that it increases our mood or gives us more energy. So that's the physical body kind of influencing the mental. And then there's lots of fascinating studies showing that if you have negative thoughts on repeat in power tests, you'll have less of a power output. We've also tested endurance in athletes, and when you're having those sort of negative thoughts and thoughts of how hard this is, I can't do it, it's too tough, you'll actually have less endurance as well. So those are just sort of key examples of how each side of that mind-body connection can influence the other really powerfully.
And I think that last part that you just said is super important for athletes to be aware of, is that the mind-body connection is in play every single second of our lives. It's just the awareness that we bring to it. So if we're never really taught about it, if we're not made aware of the importance of having our mind and body connected, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, growing up as an athlete in the 80s and 90s, aging myself, we were an absolutely toxic environment for encouraging athletes to switch off any sensation in our body, right? Like, don't be tired, don't be weak, suck it up, try harder, no pain, no gain, or my personal least favorite, pain is weakness leaving the body. And similar for emotions and our feelings, right? Don't listen to them, don't express them. They are something to try to push to one side because they will damage performance rather than invite in to help you elevate performance.
Right. And the part of pain being seen as a weakness kind of goes into that. There's like the short-term performance versus like long-term consequences as well. I remember growing up in youth sports of like, okay, there's a tournament and I have a rolled ankle or my teammate is hurting, and our coaches were always just like, oh, it's fine. Like, you're going to be fine for this like 2-day tournament, whatever it is. And then you end up having a longer consequence from that. And I think we see that a lot too in the pros. Specifically, what's coming to mind is, well, even most recently on the Pacers with Halliburton, when he kind of had that like calf strain and then he continued to play on it and then ended up tearing his Achilles, which that's like a very unique situation because it is the NBA finals. And I remember actually having a conversation with my dad about it of like, okay, what is like, are we going to sacrifice short-term performance for a long-term consequence? Or what does that conversation look like behind the scenes? Because I can also imagine if like, oh, if I didn't play in the finals, if I didn't even give myself the chance, how would I feel? Would I feel worse than having a torn Achilles? Or would I have at least been grateful or proud of myself? And, at least I can tell my team, like, at least I tried. That obviously is a bit more of like a exaggerated form of it. But in your opinion, how do you feel like ignoring the internal cues over time can lead to these long-term consequences, whether it's injury or burnout or mental health challenges as well?
Well, I think this is the problem, or the outcome of ignoring our body's cues, is that we don't understand them as well. So, right, if we're
Mm,
never paying attention to what the different signals mean about us, we don't know how to read them when it does come to those critical moments. Because I think, to the example you give with the Pacers as well, right? It's very hard to make those reads in the moment, right? You never quite know how things are going to work out, but you have a better chance if you are so used to paying attention to your body's cues and like deciphering what that means. And what I mean by that is, with sport as an athlete, we're used to dealing with certain levels of pain. Pain is typically considered your body's warning system, right? It's normally a cue to suggest something isn't going right. And because as athletes and in sport, like, a sign of any pain isn't normally enough for us to stop, right? We're used
right.
to dealing with some pain. But being able to distinguish, okay, what is my, like, this is just part of my sport and part of my work pain, versus, okay, this level of pain or this type of pain is telling me something different. Now, if we've
Mm,
completely ignored all signals, we're going to find it very hard to tell the difference. And so I often think of, like, paying attention to your cues, and that could be physical in the form of pain, or exhaustion, or slower recovery than you're used to having. It could be mental, right? Finding yourself more easily overwhelmed, or more short tempered with your family, or less able to concentrate. Any of these things, the more you pay attention to them, the more you get to know what they mean. So, kind of like having a partner or a best friend, you know what that look means that they give
right.
you, but everyone else in the room might not be able to tell, right? You want to have that relationship with you where you're like, ooh, I know when my body's feeling this way, or when my mentality is going this way, it means this. And maybe what I
Mm,
need right now is X versus Y. And so I think
mm,
the most elite athletes, and the ones that really train in this awareness, that we do a lot as mental performance consultants, can really understand the nuances of those clues and really understand what they mean for them as a person. Because as strength and conditioning coaches, as athletic trainers, and as sports coaches, we have a lot of information these days about, what is a typical progression, or how you work with an athlete, how you move through various stages of the training cycle. But every person is, of course, unique. And so the person that has the greatest amount of data to inform any decisions is typically the athlete. And so we need them to be able to share with us, as either like mental experts or physical experts, their input, so we can help make those decisions with what we know as well. So that awareness of what your mind and body are telling you can be critical to making decisions that may prevent or cause injury, may prevent or cause peak performance, and may indicate what you need to change in your training cycle. And even
absolutely.
though this is a very long answer, like, wanting to add, like, we all know, like, different sports have different sort of training cycles and different
Right.
experiences. So going back a while, my sport was endurance triathlon, so long distance triathlon. The longest of which people typically do is called an Ironman, which is very, very long, like 2.5 mile swim, 110 plus mile bike, 26-mile run in one day, back to back.
Oh my
And
goodness.
the training cycle for that is pretty long, right? And pretty brutal. And so I took on the challenge of training for an Ironman, thinking, right, I'm going to apply all my mental knowledge and how I would work with a client through this. And there becomes a part in the training cycle where I am pretty broken down, right? I am pretty exhausted. I am pretty snappy with the family. I am coming to tears pretty easily, right? Not
Yeah.
necessarily like a healthy way to live, but at that point, it was part of the training cycle, right? If
Mm,
I stopped then, I wouldn't reach my goal. But also understanding from people who had gone before me that this was a sort of a common experience, and then the things that I could do to support myself through it rather than pulling out completely made the difference in being able to complete that grueling training cycle and get to that finish line.
yeah. It is so important. Everything that you're saying is just making me reflect on the importance of the relationship that we have with ourselves. And that's kind of something that I've been preaching almost to the young teams and athletes that I've been working with right now in my career is everything that we talk about, every skill that you learn, everything that, is going to be talked about in these workshops, these sessions, whatever it is, it all comes back to the relationship that we have with ourselves. And I reflect on my time as a young athlete as well. And that was never like, I mean, I'm sure my mom tried to probably tell me it in different words, but it was nothing that I was ever really taught in that kind of like explicit language, is like your relationship with yourself. And I tell these young athletes
Yeah.
that that is a relationship that is going to be the most important relationship that you curate and that you put time and energy into throughout your whole life. Because it is obviously, you wake up with yourself, you go to bed with yourself, you do everything in your own body with yourself. And even like you said, if you're bringing in a partner, if you're bringing in a friend, a coach, a teammate, that relationship that you have with yourself is still important in those relationships with other people, because you're able to identify those internal cues that you mentioned. And then bringing it back to the sport, the relationship with yourself is really that mental game. It's everything, like everyone has a mental game, whether you pay attention to it or not. And it's those great athletes that do pay attention to it, that do put in that time and energy and the resources and the training into it, like they do the physical part of the game, that become super successful. And I think this, being able to identify it as the mind body connection, being able to, I like how you said, how can I support myself through this training? Because that is, again, a lot of times we're taught that coaches or that teammates, everyone else's opinion is kind of what validates us or what marks our value as an athlete. But if we're able to give ourselves that value and that validation and that support, especially through challenging times, then that is a great long-term consequence, honestly, of the mind-body connection. So I really love how
Absolutely.
you were able to identify that and say it so beautifully as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think absolutely, right? It's we all, those of us who work in the sports field, right? Like us as mental health and mental performance professionals, strength and conditioning coaches, skill coaches, athletic trainers, right? We all have a huge amount of knowledge and useful stuff to share, but without the input from the athlete, I don't feel like we're doing the best job possible. And
Right.
so I think there's definitely a history where, you know, coaches kind of take that position of I know best, and perhaps they
Mm,
do in certain ways, but we also have to very much have the input from the athlete. And if they don't know what they're inputting, if they haven't kind of been able to read themselves, then we have a lack of information to deal with. And I
yeah.
think to your earlier point, right, some of the way that sport has gone on through the years is encouraging a disconnect, right?
Hmm.
Don't worry about that pain, don't worry about those emotions. Don't worry about that feeling. Just do this. And so, what we've encouraged over the years is a disconnect between the mind and body, is a disconnect between, us, our relationship with ourselves. And that will only take you so far in terms of performance. I talk a lot about you can certainly reach a short term peak performance through what I would call negative means, right? Like
Mm,
switching off your cues, driving yourself through some sort of toxic um, thinking about like this is the way to get my value, etc. That will get you somewhere in the short term, but it will burn you out. And so
hmm.
increasingly as an athlete, we want to have, or for most of us, the longest career possible in a sport that we love, or we want to have the longest amount of time to become the very best at it that we can. And so, by being able to approach performance in a way that is healthy and keeps us happy and not burnt out, actually gives us more time and opportunity to reach greater heights. So, I think we've done a pretty good job so far in our field of communicating why mental health is important, or why checking in with ourselves and being aware of ourselves for mental health is a thing. I don't know that we've as yet completed the job of sort of convincing and bringing people to the understanding of these practices are also really critical to performance. They are not a
Yeah.
nice to have, but something we do once we've met performance. They are critical for performing at the highest levels and for performing at those levels over time. And that's, I think, a job that we collectively still need to do to help people understand.
Right. And kind of how you and I spoke previously before this episode of using this work as proactive rather than reactive as well. Because I think, like, to your point of what you said of mental health is becoming bigger, but it's almost like band-aid techniques in a way of like, okay, we're having a team drama, or we're having a team crisis, or this player is not doing well as they should. Let's bring in a therapist or a psychologist or whatever it might be to work with them and figure this out right now, versus, okay, let's actually take the steps. Let's implement the mental training. Let's implement this mind body connection awareness in our preseason training, in all of these things, so that it's not, oh, we're just trying to put the little fires out whenever they erupt. So that is a really key point, I think, in this mind body connection and in mental performance within sport as well. And with that being said, you also mentioned something of athletes kind of having data on themselves, knowing themselves. And for mental health and mental performance professionals like us, it makes the work a little bit smoother and easier when athletes already have that. But again, they might not be aware of that when coming to work with us. So, what would your advice, or what are certain interventions or practices or mental tools that these athletes can use to kind of start to foster that awareness that they have around their mind body connection in their mental game?
One that I like to use an awful lot is some breath work practice. So being able to spend some time with our attention on the breath. So one of the things that I like to use a lot is breath work. And typically, we can change our style of breathing to produce energy in the body or to produce a sense of relaxation in the body. And that's valuable in itself, being able to kind of control our motor a little bit. But really, why I like to use it is to start training a little bit of attention, because to be able to build our self awareness and check in with ourselves, before we're even able to do that, we need to be able to sustain enough attention on ourselves to get the information. So I'll often encourage athletes to start a practice of just trying to stick with attending to their breath for like a minute, 2 minutes at a time. So when they are breathing, they're noticing the sensation of that breath. Normally, I'd say pick a spot in your body where you feel the breath most and keep your attention there as long as you can, feeling that sensation. And when the mind wanders, you bring it back. So I start out with athletes doing that a couple of minutes a day just to train that attention. Once that's going, the next thing that I love to use is a body scan.
Mm.
And I feel like a body scan as a daily habit gives us a really wonderful kind of diagnostic tool, right? Because you start to build an idea of what is my norm, right? When I am just scanning through my body, checking the sensations in all my different muscle groups, checking what's going on in my mental space as well. I include that in a body scan. It gives us a lot of information. And if you're doing that every day, preferably around the same time of day, you start to see, okay, this is typical for me. And then when it's different, we get more information, right? Okay, I'm noticing, wow, some greater tension in my low back than I typically feel. So that might mean I need to work extra on my recovery in that area, talk to the athletic trainer, maybe need this, maybe need that. Similarly with scanning in our headspace, right? Oh, I'm noticing my head, my brain is really busy this morning. It's really seemingly more anxious, or I'm noticing that I'm having more negative thoughts, or it's just really slow and sleepy, right? It gives us this information. So we have it both as a baseline, this is what we normally are, and then as an opportunity each day to be like, okay, this is where I'm at today. And so that again starts to train more and more our ability to check in with ourselves, but also then using that information we find to help inform what we need to do for ourselves that day to perform at our best.
That's amazing. I love a body scan, and I do think that is the easiest and like most impactful way to be able to start fostering that mind body connection for athletes, because it honestly, when you think about it, it's like it is crazy that we aren't taught to even do that in the first place. Like our bodies are our, it's our energy, it's the thing that we are using to produce. So why wouldn't these things already be in place? So that is such great messaging to give to athletes, and I think especially young athletes, for them to start that practice as they're training to get to the next level. And it will just be able to help them have that longevity in the sport, and allow them to reach that peak performance a bit easier. And like you said, being able to connect with, okay, if there is an injury, if there is something that's feeling wrong, okay, how can I tweak my performance today or my training today to give my knee a little bit more care, or my back, whatever it might be.
I think it could be really common as well, and it certainly was for me when I started exploring some of these things. Really common to be uncomfortable, like trying to attend to the body. I think sometimes we're very used to the thinking brain, or we're very used to kind of like being heady. And so this idea of kind of like dropping in and trying to explore the body can be really uncomfortable for some people. Breathing in the different ways that we teach can be really uncomfortable for some people. And by some people, I mean certainly me when I started.
Yeah.
And it does become easier. So sometimes like it can feel off-putting to begin with, but I do try and
Mhm.
encourage athletes to kind of keep going, because it's like any muscle, right? We have to
Absolutely.
develop it to be able to use it. And at first it feels hard and clunky and maybe sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but we can get
Yeah.
there and make it beneficial and strong.
Yes. You also mentioned a part about coaches being able to, oh, I don't think these were your words, but coaches being able to trust an athlete, that an athlete knows themselves best as well. And the words that you used were that coaches usually feel like they know best, which, yes and no. Yes, they know best maybe about their sport, their offense, their whatever it might be on the physical side of the game. But when it does come to the mental game, obviously, I mean, I don't know of many coaches who are sports psychologists or mental health professionals as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say they know best about their athletes' mental health or their athletes' mind body connection. Have you ever run into kind of that messaging from a coach before? Or what would your advice be to coaches or to athletes who are kind of running into that challenge of, I feel like I'm connected with my mind and body, but it's just being ignored by my coach or even my athletic trainer or whoever it might be?
Hmm. I think a lot of head coaches these days probably grew up as an athlete in the same period of time as me, so we're very exposed to this no pain, no gain, like F your feelings vibe. And whilst I think intellectually they very much believe in like not wanting to pass that on and having a healthier environment. I think unfortunately it's just a bit internalized, and so sometimes unwittingly they're perpetuating some of that in the ways that they behave. Again, I don't think that's often deliberate, but it's what we kind of grew up with and we're used to, and so we sometimes default to unconsciously. And so the things I would say for athletes in those spaces is to keep trying to communicate what's going on for you, and keep trying to express your needs, right? Self advocacy is important in these spaces just as they are in others. Now, I know that sometimes walks a tight line, because people are concerned if they push back on a coach or communicate a need for some rest or something a little bit different to what the coach is suggesting, that might interrupt their position with the coach or their playing time or something like that. And that absolutely is a risk, but I also think that coaches, again, well meaning as they are, can hear sometimes that feedback and it make a meaningful change. So the other thing I suggest for athletes in that space, if they're not comfortable giving that feedback to their coach, is just doing their very best to apply it for themselves, right? If
Mm.
they don't feel that they can ask their coach for, let's say, rest, that's often a common one that we feel like we're not able to ask for. how do we build it in the spaces that we do have control over, right? Because I'll certainly know that as an athlete myself in college, I would kind of want my coach to go easy on me, but also because I was feeling tired, I should say, on those days. But also, I wasn't kind of doing myself any favors by managing my sleep schedule or looking after myself like outside of that training. Not to say that everyone who feels tired is doing something that contributes to that, but is there something more we could do to incorporate our self-care that might help with that, so that we're doing everything within our power? I think a phrase that we hear a lot and I use a lot in sport is controlling the controllables.
Yes.
If the coach is, an uncontrollable or an unchangeable, what do we have control over that can help us feel at our best? I must say I'm positive that a lot of coaches are becoming more open to this, at least in understanding, again, not just about wanting their athletes, their players, whatever their sport might be, to be mentally healthy. I think they do care about that, but also to the bottom line of what they get sort of judged on, which is performance. A healthy
Right.
athlete is typically a higher performing athlete. And so something that I've done with several teams are these sort of pre-season assessments, so I can help coaches kind of understand, okay, how do you get the best out of this player? What motivates them? What demotivates them? What are going to be the things that wear them out? What do they care about? How are you going to give them feedback so that it's sort of lands well with them and they can actually apply it? And so I feel coaches are very open to having feedback and support that helps them improve performance. I think sometimes they can be less attentive to the idea that this is proactive for mental health. But if you talk to them about how this is actually going to help them win, that often goes further.
Absolutely. And I think the part of that stuck out to me most is that conversation that you create between the player and the coach, whether it's direct or indirect or through like writing it down, whatever it might be, it's still there and it's still being created, which is so important because I've had a lot of coaches who just kind of do like a one size fits all approach. And I know for me, I was not motivated the same way as the teammate next to me. Everyone is their own athlete, their own individual, and the best is taken out of them through different modalities. And it is so cool to hear that the teams that you work with are given that opportunity to be able to voice that part of this game. Because we do, as athletes, we are performing obviously for ourselves and for the team, but for the coach as well. We have to do well for our coach to be able to keep their job, especially in times like now with sports, college sports specifically, really blowing up. Professional sports coaches, the coaching job security is not the best. So why not, like if I'm the coach and I'm relying on these players for my job, let me give them everything that they need to be able to be the best. And then in turn, that's also helping me. And again, it kind of does go back to that, like the controllables, which I feel like is a huge theme of our work, is encouraging athletes, encouraging coaches, encouraging anyone in the sports world to go back to things that they can control to ease the stress or whatever it might be, the anxiety, anything that comes up for them, because a lot of sport is out of our control. It is based on other people's opinion. It's based on maybe how another team shows up. But if we're focused on all of that stuff, like you said, especially too with if a coach is maybe invalidating the mind-body connection, okay, I'm not going to be able to control what they're thinking, but let me go back to my routines. Let me go back to everything I'm doing to make sure I'm also setting myself up for success, because we can't just continue to rely on people for our own successes, because it would just be way too hard to be able to foster a healthy relationship with ourselves or with the sport if that is the mindset that we have.
Absolutely. And sport is part of why we love to watch it and to play it, is because it's unpredictable, right? If we
Exactly.
knew who was going to win every game or every race before it happened, like looking at their training or what we'd expect, like nobody would tune in for that. Where would be the fun and
Right.
the risk? And so, we can do everything we can do, and it just still be the day. I work a lot with basketball. It can still be the day that the ball just isn't going through the net, no matter how good you
Right.
are, right? No one shot. Like I've seen a bunch this week where the ball has just gone in, spun around, and spat itself back out.
Yeah.
And if you get sort of caught up in these things that are just out of your control, it'll eat you alive.
Yeah.
Whereas if you come back to, okay, I keep shooting, I keep passing, I keep thinking positive thoughts, I keep staying with my confidence, I stay with my body, like we keep going and control the things that we can control. And at some point, it'll become the day that every shot falls versus every shot bounces out. But again, we have to stick around long enough and be present long enough, whether that's in a game or over a career, to be able to reach those moments where everything kind of lines up for us and have that absolutely dream performance. And we can
Right.
control the things that we can control to contribute that. And one of those things is, again, our longevity, to be around to get those moments when the sport gods, smile on us.
Exactly. And putting that trust into yourself, putting that trust and time and effort into the mental game, into the mind body connection, is those are the steps that we can take to get there. And there's things within that we can control every day. Like you said, the body scans, the breath work, all of those things are within our control. And they're things we can do every day to set ourselves up for peak performance, for success, for whatever it is. And if we're doing those things, the rest will follow. And that's all we can really count on in the sport, which is it's empowering, but then it's also like, okay, let me really lock into that now, because I think a lot of athletes and coaches don't focus on that side. So being able to bring in mental health and mental performance professionals to help coaches with that is such a great addition to a team, because it would be impossible for a coach to have to focus on that as well. Like we don't see head coaches doing weight training. We don't see them doing taping ankles, all of those things. It's another aspect of the sport that requires a professional. So being able to bring in people to help your athletes reach that and focus on those controllables and have it also as a team thing and not just a few athletes are doing it here and there. It's everyone is doing it. Hey athletes, it's Haley Herdman, host of Mental Training Room. Also, mental performance coach and mental health therapist. If you're listening to this, I know you're putting the work into your physical game. But what are you doing for your mental game? That's where I come in. I work with athletes, teams, and parents to build confidence, handle pressure, and develop the mindset it takes to perform at your best and be considered mentally elite. Whether it's through one-on-one coaching, team sessions, or parent workshops, I'm here to help you train the mind like you train your body. Want to work together? Reach out on Instagram at mtr.pod or visit haleyherdman.com to get started.
I think it's so powerful to come in and do performance work and preventative work, as you were mentioning
Absolutely.
earlier, right? I think a lot of teams now have folks that they will refer athletes to for mental health when they start showing sort of symptoms of distress.
Right.
But there's so much work that you can do that would prevent getting to those symptoms of distress. And again, from a performance point of view, if we can prevent getting into what I would call a mental health hole, you're going to have your athlete more available. You're going to have your athlete more locked in. You're going to have your athlete as a better member of your team. And that's just, preventative work on mental health. And that's about kind of promoting well-being. And then mental performance is sort of promoting the skills that it takes to perform under pressure. And that's, the skills that we've mentioned already, being able to tune into your mind and body, being able to notice and control, redirect your thoughts to something that's useful towards your goal, knowing what those goals are and setting them, having routines and habits that you incorporate, not just when it comes to that big pressure game day, but every day when you practice and train. And so setting those out at the beginning of the season, I think can be incredibly useful. And I think the athletes that are doing that are the ones that sort of rise to the top again, because they have more consistency and availability. And then the teams that are doing that right from the beginning also have a stronger foundation. Now, plenty of teams will arrive at the idea of mental performance when they're partway through a season and perhaps see that an athlete breaks down under particular pressure, or when something isn't going their way, and now we want to work on that mental resilience. And you can definitely work at it in those spots, but if you were to sort of teach it from the beginning, there's less downtime. And
Yeah.
of course, again, in the sports that I spend a lot of time with at the moment, that downtime can make or break a season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that again reminds me of the part of the brain that it's just like, okay, the brain is a muscle too. Like, if we're only going to practice free throws the day of a game, like that's not going to set us up for success. If we're only going to lift weights like the night before a game, that's not how it works. And the brain is the same thing. And being able to put in
Absolutely.
the work for the mental game, being able to train your mental game is what athletes need. They need proactive part of it, not just the band-aid approach or the once a month or once before a game type of approach, because that is not what is going to foster that mind-body connection for them in the long run. And they're not going to be able to be focused on it in a game if it's just, you know, the day before the game, we do like a team visualization. It's not something that their brain is used to. So why would they be able to go back to it in a game situation when everything's on the line? There's a lot of pressure. You go back to your training. You fall back to what you know. And if that's not what you know, if that's not what you're doing on a daily, it's not going to be something that you can just magically do during a game. And I think that's also part of it that coaches and athletes and parents need to be aware of too, is it's a daily practice. It's a daily form of training. And to be able to include this in an athlete's training regimen is only going to help them in their career.
You're so right. And just the way that the brain grows and develops, right? You know
Yeah.
this, that the brain is very malleable and changeable, and
Mm-hmm.
it changes through behavior. So the more times we have an experience of something, the better able our brain is to handle it or produce it. And so every time we practice a new mental skill, it kind of builds a deeper groove in our brain and makes it easier to practice again. But it is that practice, that repetition, that kind of creates the mental habit so that it can kick in when we need it most. And
Mm-hmm.
that's often the challenging part, is helping somebody create a new habit, right? That part of
Yeah.
getting the repetitions in before it is habit is often very, very challenging, particularly with busy athletes. And so I
Yep.
think having availability, being present where the athletes are, so you can help them get these reps in during practice, during training, pre-game, post-game, like helping them get these reps when they are most applicable, is also really valuable. And I think, you made another great point, right? We strengthen our bodies pretty much daily, right? We're lifting weights, we're training for our sport. And there was a time when a strength and conditioning coach would have been a rarity or a luxury in
Yeah.
sporting world. And now every athlete and team that is remotely serious about their sport has that person on staff. And I feel like that as a profession has done a great job of like demonstrating the value that it gives. Ours is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a little harder to demonstrate the value, but it's the same thing, right? We should be, as you say, practicing daily, learning these skills, reinforcing them, developing that muscle, and then keeping that muscle so that it comes up in the moments we need it most. Because to your point, we sink to the level of our training rather than rise to an
Yep.
occasion.
Yep. What would your advice be, or do you have any suggestions for athletes who are trying to create those habits? Because I know how hard it is to create a habit. This is something that I'm trying as well in my life now, is like, okay, how can I find a routine where I am doing my journaling or I'm implementing my meditation or even just like my physical workouts in my life now, like trying to find that routine. I have my ways and kind of things that have worked for me, but I'm wondering if you have anything that you share with athletes to kind of help them on this journey of creating a new habit or routine when it comes to these mental skills and mental tools?
Yeah, I mean, starting a new habit is, I think, very difficult for all of us. And
Yeah.
so it's how do we A, make it easier, and then B, make it more rewarding. That's
Mm.
normally how I think about getting somebody going on something new. Making it easier is like, okay, we set up a specific time or a specific space, or we put together the things that we need to perform this habit so it's all ready to go when we have the time to do it. Some people do this if they're trying to get back into a workout regime. They're like, okay, if I want to go to the gym in the morning, I lay out all my clothes, I set my alarm to give me at least a snooze because I know myself, I won't get up right away. And make myself a breakfast that I can take on the way, right? We do these things to kind of set up and give us the best possible chance of doing the repetition that we're looking for to inform that habit. So making it more accessible, making it easier to do. And then making it sort of more rewarding to do. Athletes, for the most part, we lean toward a little bit of the type A. So we tend to like
Yep.
some things that make us feel good, like we're doing the right thing. I love a good
Yeah.
checkbox marker. So if you're
Mm.
practicing a new skill, like make sure there's something where you get to tick or mark that you did it for that day. There's plenty of apps for that as well. Have an accountability partner, so somebody that you text to say, I did my thing, did you do your thing? That tends to keep us a little bit on track. And then third, I am not above some straight up self-bribery, right?
Oh,
If
yeah.
I do this thing today, I get this. If I do this thing 3 times this week, I get this. If I do. So for me, often I have a bad habit of being a stereotypical Brit. I love tea. So if I do this
I was going to
thing,
say
I get to have
my
this
reward is
fancy tea.
matcha. So,
Yes, yes, I love it. Like a matcha latte. Oh, is
yeah,
there anything better? But
amazing.
sometimes, and we need to adjust the reward to adjust the level of motivation. Like, there are
Hmm.
some days like, forget the tea. I'm not doing that for a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Forget it. So on those days, or for that task, like if it's something bigger, I might need a bigger reward. I might need, okay, if
Mm.
I'm going to do this, I get to buy those sneakers. Or if I'm going to do this, I get to watch 2 episodes of Love Island, which is my favorite trash TV show. So we sometimes have to think about matching the reward to the amount of effort it's going to take to do this thing. Something that's
Yeah.
going to really encourage us to do it. And obviously you can't do that for everything and for an entire lifetime, but it
Right.
helps to get things started. Normally, once we're kind of in process, once we've got, a few repetitions under our belt, things become easier to do. We start getting towards that habit where they are a little bit more self-perpetuating. And so
Hmm.
we can scale back on the rewards if you wish. Nothing wrong with rewarding yourself forever,
Yeah.
but that can probably become expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you do it as long as you need that little extra shove, and then you kind of get rolling with some momentum. And then at different times, we'll probably need that shove again, right? I find
Hmm.
for me, after a break, if I've been on vacation, some of my routines need a little shove again when I get back. So yeah, don't be shy to bribe yourself.
Yeah. I completely agree with the self reward. And it just goes back to like your relationship with yourself. Like if you think of a friend that did something that you're proud of, oh, you would give them like a little card or flowers or something. So why not do that with yourself too? And then same, love, love, love a good old written out checklist. Like
Mm,
there is nothing more satisfying than being able to be like, a routine for me that I'm trying to build for myself right now, or a habit, is like less screen time. So being able to
mm-hmm,
like write that out and at the end of the day be like, yes, yes, did that. Or if I didn't, and then again, recognizing that internal cue of, okay, I don't feel the best about that. So I'm going to make sure that I am more on top of it tomorrow or the next day or whenever it
mm-hmm.
is. It's the new habits are very, very hard to build, and I think a lot of people just think, oh, I'm going to say it and it's going to happen, I'm going to remember to do it. But there's, as we know, there's a lot more that goes into it. So those things that you just shared are extremely helpful, and hopefully athletes can hear that, and some of them speak to them maybe more than others, and then that can help them create these new practices or whatever it might be that they're trying to bring into their life. So those were really, really awesome pieces of advice. So thank you for sharing those.
Glad. I think sometimes as well with athletes, we are typically dealing with younger people, whether they're young or just even in pros. I work a lot with sort of elite level athletes, college and pro level. And they're still, as human beings, kind of developing their skills to set and make routines. And so when they have older
Yeah.
coaches who are just like, look, just do this thing, and then they get frustrated because the athlete seems to have a hard time like putting that into practice. I think
Right.
sometimes they're applying their 40-year-old brain skill to a 22-year-old's brain
Yeah.
skill, um, and then lose patience with them. But new habits are hard for everyone, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
age, but certainly can be difficult at younger ages as well, as you're still kind of figuring out your systems.
This episode is sponsored by Defend USA, performance and recovery apparel designed for athletes who know that the mental and physical recovery go hand in hand. Defend's graduated compression technology enhances performance by improving circulation, reducing muscle fatigue, and increasing endurance during workouts. Designed for athletes of all levels, it also supports faster recovery by minimizing soreness and promoting better post-training blood flow. Just like we train the mind, we have to take care of the body. And Defend helps you do both. Check them out at dfndusa.com and use code MTR10 for 10% off. Train hard, recover smarter, perform stronger with Defend USA.
You said you were trying to reduce screen time. I'm trying to reduce social time. And one of the ways I've made it easier for myself is I bought myself a brick. Have you come across these? They're little like devices that your phone can scan, and you set it up so that when you scan it, it switches off access to whatever apps you don't want to access. And then it doesn't switch back on until you go back to it and scan it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredibly helpful. I know technically I could switch off those apps on my phone myself, but then I also, when I pick up my phone, could switch them back on. Now I have to go all the way downstairs.
Yeah, too easy to override.
Little, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess it speaks somewhat to my laziness that I'm like, ugh, I don't want to go downstairs just so I can scroll through Instagram. And so I've already managed to do less just by making it easier to not scroll, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
finding little tricks is definitely worth a bit of research. Normally somebody is trying to figure it out too, and you can find some good tips online if you Google the habit you're trying to create.
Absolutely. That is so cool, and I'm actually going to have to look into that because sounds like exactly what I need.
It is saving me currently.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for everything that you shared with us today on this episode. It was so amazing to hear more from you and just continue to learn from you. And the listeners are so lucky to be able to learn from you as well and everything that we talked about today. So yeah, thank you so much for your time and for your insight.
I mean, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. And I really enjoyed talking to you, Haley. You have so many smart thoughts on this area. And I think our field is really lucky to have you and new people kind of coming in to bring fresh ideas and fresh blood. And I just hope that those of us have been in it are trying to lead a path to make this a more prominent role and doing good work to kind of lay the foundation for everyone who's coming in. So thank you for picking up the baton.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr.
Pleasure.
That's it for today in the Mental Training Room.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram at mtr.pod to stay up to date with all things mental training.